Hi, my name's Hannes. This is Painting by Letters, and today I want to document a fun project. As I said in my last Necron video, the way that I motivated myself to get over the line with those warriors was to promise myself something fun on the horizon. That fun thing I promised myself was that I finally got to tackle the Void Dragon. Even though originally my plan had been to do all of the troops and then to do the fun ones, by allowing myself to complete the Void Dragon as a reward for completing those warriors, it made the process of getting through them much quicker. So today we're going to talk about that, and I have to be really honest with you, this is one of the most fun models I think I've ever painted in my entire time in the hobby. It's also probably the most difficult model that I've ever put together, but it is joyous to build. So if you've ever been sat on the fence and thinking about buying this cool model, I'll bury the lead now and just tell you to go and buy it. It is fabulous. It really is. When I initially got the box out for review, I tried to look through the manual a little bit and realised almost straight away that this was going to be something completely different. Due to the way the model's structured, there is this kind of bed of lightning, essentially, and the model rests on top of it. But even worse than that, the connection points are all basically sideways on, meaning it doesn't rest on top of a bed of lightning, but rather is glued sideways into it. This immediately makes it much harder to build. Despite that though, when putting it together, I realised it was going to be quite a fun project almost immediately. The parts individually just scream motion, the intricacies are really fascinating, and there's tons of different textures and things like that you can use different painting techniques on to get different results. So even at those early stages, I knew I was onto a winner with this one. I went on Amazon a few weeks ago and bought this dirt cheap hobby drill, mostly because I see quite a lot of people messing about with them, and I found this one for under $5 on Amazon. It's got a really awful smell to it, some kind of like hard metallic smell, quite oily, and the pieces do seem to leave some kind of metallic residue on my hands. But all the same, even this dirt cheap, really small drill made very light work of the compressed plastics. Using this and some paper clips I bought off Amazon, I found it incredibly easy to produce some sub-assemblies, glued them onto pieces of cork and the top of an old shaving foam tub, and then sprayed them. As I've done before, it's just a spray of Chaos Black and then Lead Belcher over the top. Sometimes this combination seems to work for me, sometimes it doesn't, but here I found the application was absolutely spotless. And to be fair, when it comes to the actual body of the Void Dragon, that's me pretty much done. I wanted it to be that kind of darker metallic colour anyway, and I was hoping that the other colours would kind of bring it alive a little bit. So as this project, at least to me, seemed quite momentous, seemed quite fun, seemed something interesting, I decided I wanted to test something new. You see, I've fallen down a bit of a rabbit hole, and that rabbit hole is I watch absolutely tons of Artis Opus videos and pretend to myself that I probably could use some of those techniques. No disrespect to Artis Opus, their channel is just fabulous if you've not come across it, but I do fear that it's a little bit out of my painting league. Despite the fact that the channel is very much aimed at the newer painters learning the more difficult techniques, it still just feels a little bit out of reach. One of the things that they demonstrate in their videos is their method of doing dry brushing. There's no other way to describe it other than the fact that the dry brushing, once complete, sort of looks like it's been airbrushed, and I'm quite a big fan of that style. The thing is, if I'm really honest with you, I don't particularly want an airbrush. I'll talk in a future video about why I'm a bit weird about things that you can breathe in, but airbrushes in particular is just not something that I really want around. And if I can produce those effects, which I really like, but I can do so through something I would feel more comfortable using, then I thought that would be the best route forwards. You can see here that I started with something that I've dry brushed many times before, in stone. Initially on the base and then on the kind of hovering chunks of stone as well, just as a bit of a warm up, using these army painter brushes just to remind myself that I can kind of do the basics, I suppose. And then I wanted my real test to be these wings. So, exactly the same as I've done in every other Necron video, because I wanted it to match the rest of my army, I picked out the same 3 colours. Warpstone Glow, as a base, it's quite deep, it's quite rich, but it's a bit darker. Then Warboss Green, which is a bit desaturated and a bit lighter. And then Moot Green, which is a bit more of a yellow green. This was my real test. I wanted to use these 3 colours to create a really nice transition from the dark green to the light green. Traditionally, that Moot Green would have only been used as highlighting, and I made the decision that I wanted this to stand by itself without highlighting at this point. I really took my time with this, although having said that, if I'd done this as a glaze, it would have taken easily 4 or 5 times the amount of time. But just taking it really slowly, and I also mixed those 3 colours together, so instead of it just being Warpstone, Warboss and Moot, there was also a mix of Warpstone and Warboss, a mix of Warboss and Moot, and then finally I mixed in some Sun Yellow as well to that Moot Green just to give an additional colour on top. I can't deny it, I am very happy with this. As someone that's never really messed about with this method of creating colour transitions, it's stunning. It's really, really nice. And this goes on that list of things that's nicer off camera than it is on as well. I'm not gonna lie, in a couple of places it's a little bit chalky, and I probably could have kept the dry brushes a little bit damper. But the transitions are just so clean. They fade into each other, they really do. And it creates something very visually striking. I think one of the things that I think about quite a lot, and this might be the fact that I do quite a lot of branding related stuff in my day job, but I think about things looking like they should be in the same collection. In this case, I guess an army. And it was important that these greens really matched the greens the rest of my Necrons had, because this is the equivalent of those shoulder panels. And it really does. It looks striking, it looks individual and interesting, it makes it stand out, but it's still very clearly part of the same whole. Honestly, if you haven't looked at Artus Opus's dry brushing techniques, I couldn't recommend them enough. From just watching the Space Wolf video, I decided to sort of pick this up as a bit of a test, and since doing this, because I may have bought some more Marines recently, I have decided that I'm going to see if I can replicate the effect from that Artus Opus video in its sort of original style with the Space Wolves. But this was just a great little opportunity to have a practice. I've been thinking about it a little bit as well. If you're looking to challenge yourself when it comes to painting, it's probably a really good idea to pick something up like a Void Dragon, or whatever your army's equivalent might be, whether that's a Dreadnought or something like that, because it's a space where you can do something different but similar, if that makes sense. It's a different set of textures, it's a different presentation of the same kind of painting style, so you can practice with something that is genuinely distinct while still making sure that it looks vaguely similar. And now I've done this, I'm really thinking about how to implement these techniques into other armies that I think would really suit this style of painting. To paint the lightning, and again to try and make sure that it matched the rest of my army, I decided to pick out the red colour, as I'd already used green on the wings, and I sort of wanted the weapon to look very distinct from some of the other ones that exist in my army as a point of difference. I decided to use the red colours that I've typically been using for weapons here on the lightning. And this process took a while, I'm not going to deny it. I've picked back up an audio copy of The Twice Dead King, because I sort of fell out of it when I was about a third of the way through, and I've sort of picked it back up again, and I think I went through about 4 or 5 chapters just doing this stuff. If you're going to do it, really take your time with it. Luckily, in an earlier step, I built up quite a bit of lighter grey on these sections by just sort of dry brushing the greys I was using on the stone over the lightning, and without that I would have really struggled. But 2 thin coats of Vallejo's Bloody Red over all of these lightning pieces really did take a while. At that juncture I was really dreading how long this was going to take. But having said that, when I got the orange fire over it and I started blending that orange fire over the top, the process vastly sped up. Because I'm using the red for the lightning and then I'm using the orange to sort of pick out the midpoints and the highlighted points, I suppose, the subsequent steps became much quicker. So even though I probably spent about 2 hours just painting the red in and then doing a second coat, the subsequent steps were pretty swift. So a very thin coat of orange fire over a couple of the raised edges, and then I did a couple of mixes between orange fire and sun yellow, ever increasing towards those points I wanted it to be lighter. Thinking about the moments where the lightning sort of arcs away, or moments that multiple pieces of lightning meet, really trying to make those brighter and more vibrant as I went. This then continued into just pure sun yellow, and then finally, although I do think it desaturated it a little bit, which maybe was a mistake, I used a mix of sun yellow and a bone white, just an ever so slight off-white to go into some of the brightest points. The result of this over the headdress and wings I think is really cool. I think it's created a really nice effect. I think over the lower bits of lightning I probably could have made it slightly more vibrant. I've been thinking subsequently about maybe doing like a line highlight all the way down through the lightning, but I didn't do that when I was initially painting it. However, I've got to say I'm still quite happy with it, and I think because those colours are a bit darker and a bit more subtle than the colours over the wings and the headdress where the really vibrancy did come through, it sort of sets the model out of its base quite a lot, which I do quite like. So, like pretty much everyone else on the internet, I've been hearing a hell of a lot about too thin coats. I mentioned in a previous video that I wanted to test them. I picked up 3 that came together, or at least they came together in the store. I don't know if they're designed to come together originally, which was Royal Cloak, Sword Hilt Burgundy and Glistening Gums. I used these 3 paints and a mix of a pure white to create the weapon. Might seem a bit weird, but I wanted this weapon genuinely to not stand out too much. I think the reason for that is because for me the takeaways were the wings and the vibrancy of those, that headdress, the lightning coursing through the body and stuff like that. I really didn't want this weapon to steal too much of the limelight, and so I thought it looking distinct from the body and it looking like something that had had a decent amount of effort on it, because it did, but maybe not being quite as vibrant as the rest of the body was a really good way to go. I feel like I say this about everything. Gotta say, I was quite impressed with the Duncan Rhodes Painting Academy Too Thin Coats paints. The coverage is really good. It's probably the best of any of the paints that I've been messing about with. But I found it dried really slowly. If you're someone that really loves wet blending, I could not recommend these paints enough. They're perfect for something like that. I think for the painting I do, they just took slightly too long to dry somehow compared to other paint brands that I've used. But given that, that does give me, who, although I do really like wet blending, probably isn't very good at it, it probably does give me the opportunity to get better at it. So probably more to come when it comes to that paint brand. I'll probably have a couple more practices. I think maybe looking to replace the reds that I use with too thin coats, because I do wet blending but sometimes it doesn't quite work, might be a good shout. I don't know. But using the purple as a base, using the Sword Hilt Burgundy as a general accent across the entire piece, and then Glistening Gums to pick out the edges and points of important detail, and then mixing some white through it and going back through them again as a very quick, dirty, but I think quite effective highlight. Again, I'm not really intending this to stand out on the model, just to do something a bit more interesting. And then we've sort of got the regular usual stuff. So texture paint on the base, which took absolutely ages to dry. I'd only really had 1 day to do this, so I really was sat there, I think at about 8 o'clock, just willing this thing to dry, but never mind. Then painted it brown. I picked out some pieces on the model with silver, just to sort of give the metallic body a bit of visual interest. Having said that though, given everything that surrounds it, I don't think this step was really worth doing. At most it could have been a dry brush. I don't know why I sort of sat there with a brush and did it properly. I used Agarax everywhere other than things like the wings. It went over pretty much everything, but I was really careful to stop it collecting. I went over a second time in some of the recesses over the body just to really pick out the muscle tone and stuff like that. then traditional contrast on the base, and then building it all together. I'm going to do this a bit at speed because the final build was genuinely a bit nightmarish. I think some of the parts had slightly warped, I don't know. Might just be the case that they were sort of built, primed, and then sat in a box for about a week and a half. Don't know if that's caused them any damage, but it wasn't the easiest to put together. There was a lot of cleaning contact points, trying with plastic glue, it not quite working, and then going back over with super glue. If I'd thought ahead, I probably would have pinned the model, but then I think I was so happy with it that I was so dangerous to damage it that just super glue going over it. And then here we've got the finished effect. Yeah, I just love this thing. It's really reinvigorated me, I've got to be honest. I've got quite a lot going on with work and some stuff in my personal life, and this was just an opportunity to sit down for literally a whole day and paint a model and mess about with new stuff and do cool things and listen to an audiobook on Audible, and it was just great. I really love this. I'm really proud of it. I think it looks really effective. It stands very tall compared to other models, but it's just stunning. Weirdly, when I've been doing lots of the repainting for this channel and stuff like that, and I'm obviously documenting my process through my Necrons, it's been a lot of, I'm very glad that's complete, on to the next one. This is the first time in a while I've genuinely been looking at something I've made and feeling quite proud of it. This feels like a testament to the fact that I'm a better painter than I probably was 6 months ago. I have got slightly better. Not a lot better, I'm not lying to myself, but I've tried new things, they've worked, I've implemented things that worked on other models, and here I have something that I genuinely quite like. That's quite cool. I know I said it at the start, but if you have been thinking about buying this model and you have a Necron army, genuinely do it. It is quite intimidating when you get it out the box, but it was a really fun painting task, and it gives you the opportunity to mess about with things that you wouldn't do normally. There are a couple of things that I would update if I was to go back over. I think some of the stonework could just be a bit nicer. I think some of the bits where the glue is kind of created a bit of a glistening edge probably could be painted over. And as I said before, I think I could have added more definition to the lighting by maybe doing some line highlights over all of them. But despite that, I'm just really proud of it. It's just something that I think is really cool, and I'm really glad that I spent some time on it and did something fun. Just to close this off, thank you so much for watching and listening to me ramble about a bit of fun that I had. This has been Painting by Letters. I've been Hannes, and keep safe out there.